often creating our own reality. We create our own take on the moment. We are not experiencing what's going on. Oh, Lord. We're not experiencing what's going on in the world. We are experiencing our thoughts about what's going on outside of ourselves. Those things are all happening. Everything is happening. But our experience is coming from the meaning we are making of it with our thinking and our senses that make our thinking look real to us. So, reality is always what our thinking makes look real to us. Mavis Karn, retired licensed clinical social worker. Hey, social media, it's Stephen Middleton coming to you live from the Possibility Action Network. Our core values include I am, I can, and I will. I am Possibility Man. Today, I want to share on the topic living in a thought created reality. But first, if you have not subscribed to my YouTube channel, I will put a link in the text below. Hit it and subscribe, and you'll get notifications when I offer new content. Now, today, I want to fly by the seat of my pants to talk about something that I've been giving considerable, just consideration to for a little while. And again, the theme is living in a thought created world. Well, I'm inspired, as I've said in other videos, by the 20th century philosopher Sydney Banks. Sydney Banks in 1973 had this realization whereby he said that he had cracked the code on human life. He said that human life really was lived out of three principles. And these principles included mind, consciousness, and thought. Now, I'm not an expert on Sydney Banks, but I'm certain that he would agree that he did not create these principles, but that he discovered these principles. It would be a lot like someone saying that they created the law of physics or that they created the law of gravity. No one can make claim to that, but some people can get some insights around the law of physics and the law of gravity. And I would think that Sydney Banks would explain it that way. And he began to teach a generation of people, including psychologists and social workers and other health professionals, who now share his message around the world. And I want to play with this message with you today, and I want to see what you make of it with me. Feel free to put a comment if you're watching this on YouTube, put a comment in the comment section. If you're seeing this on Facebook, put a comment below, and let's have a conversation about this. Perhaps we can also host a seminar about this on Zoom or something like that. Now, what Mavis Karn told us, and she was one of Sydney Banks' students, is that we live in the reality of our thinking, not the reality of our experience or an event. I want to explore this with you with someone that many of you will know about, and his name is Frederick Douglass. That is, I want to overlay what Sydney Banks talk about with the experience of Frederick Douglass, because I think Frederick Douglass understood the same thing that Sydney Banks understood, even though Frederick Douglass did not articulate it in that particular way. I want to read some excerpts from Frederick Douglass's narrative. I want to add some commentary on it, and we'll see if we can apply this to our lives today. Frederick Douglass writes in his autobiography, Edward Covey succeeded in breaking me. I was broken in body, soul, and spirit. My natural elasticity was crushed. My intellect languished. The disposition to read departed. The cheerful spark that lingered about my eye died. The dark night of slavery closed in upon me, and behold, a man transformed into a brute, that is, a slave. Now, what is Frederick Douglass telling us here? That he had bought in to the messages given to him by Edward Covey, and that the existence of slavery, which was real, slavery, American slavery did exist, but he said he began to internalize it. And once he internalized it, the external form, American slavery, became his reality. Douglass continued, I was sometimes prompted to take my life, but was prevented by a combination of hope and fear. My sufferings seem now like a dream rather than a stern reality. What is he sharing here? That as he internalized his situation, slavery was brutal, but as he thought about it, he thought that the only hope for him was to actually take his life. That is, he experienced depression, he experienced anxiety, he experienced hopelessness. And in his despair, from moment to moment, he said, he felt life ending it all, but for hope and fear. Now, later, as his mind cleared, as he looked back at that experience, he said, oh, it was like I was dreaming. Now, he was not dreaming up the institution of American slavery, but he was dreaming up his despair that he could not make it, that he was so depressed that he should take his life. Douglass continued, you have seen how a man was made a slave. You shall see how a slave was made a man. Douglass here will describe, in part, because I can only be partial here, his own transformation. You will see him transformed from the belief that he must conform to American slavery into the belief that he can actually live in a different reality, even though the existence of American slavery was real. And then he wrote, but at this moment, from whence came the spirit, I don't know. I resolved to fight. That is, Douglass had an insight. The slave breaker who had control of him for 1 year to make him conform to slavery, Douglass said, he had the insight that he could resist him, that he could fight him. Now, Douglass understood this. He understood that by resisting, that he might be killed. He said that he was willing to accept that outcome if that was his fate. He had the insight that he could resist. He continued, we were at it for 2 hours. That is, they were engaged in their tussle, in their fight, in their combat for approximately 2 hours. Covey at last let me go. This battle was the turning point in my career as a slave. It rekindled the few expiring embers of freedom and revived within me a sense of my own manhood. It recalled the departed self-confidence and inspired me again with the determination to be free. Douglass had the insight that even though American slavery was all around him in the southern states, even though American slavery was enforced by federal law, even though American slavery was enforced by a culture that supported it, he had the insight that he could become free. And that insight of freedom became his reality. Here is what he had to say about it. It was a glorious resurrection. from the tomb of slavery to the heaven of freedom. My long crushed spirit rose, cowardice departed. Behold, defiance took its place. And I now resolved that however long I might remain a slave in form, the day had passed forever when I could be a slave in fact. Douglass is telling us about reality. Now, outside, American slavery exists. No disputing that. He did not dispute that. Outside of him, American law supported it. But Douglass saw freedom inside of him. And notice his powerful words that he would remain a slave in form. They could hold him in slavery in form. But the day had passed forever when I could be a slave in fact. Now, what are the implications here for you and me? Why was Sidney Banks so excited about his discovery? Why did he commit the rest of his life to sharing it with other people? Because he understood that there are two worlds. There is the outside world, which we may change or may not change, and there is the inside world. Now, what Douglas' experience shows us is that when one becomes clear in his thinking, in Douglas's case, that it's possible to know what decisive action to take to overcome something as brutal as American slavery. Now, what are the implications here for you and for me? What are the implications here for our children? What are the implications here for countries around the world? The implication is that we can become free, that we can jump the boundaries of time, that we can recognize that there is a freedom that surpasses whatever form exists around us. We may be able to come to understand that a state of depression is not coming from a bad boss. It's not coming from a hostile work environment. You know, a hostile work environment might exist. A bad boss very well could exist in your place of employment. But that and is an outside condition in order for it to reach a person, unless, of course, they are attacking you physically, is that you must, in thought, buy into it. And that's what Mavis Karn was also telling us. Without our buy in, without our using our thought to apply what someone else says about us, there is no way that the outside can affect the inside. And once our mind clears, at Frederick Douglass, we may get some insights about how to transform a hostile work environment. You know, Edward Covey began to treat Frederick Douglass different once he discovered that Frederick Douglass was not a slave and could not be a slave. Douglass was with him for several more months, and Covey never touched him, never tried to treat him as if he was less than a human being. And by the way, Douglass was only about 16 years old at the time. He was not yet in his 20s. The implications, once again, of this is huge. You know, when I was teaching at a university, my colleagues would frequently try to engage in controversial subjects. I rarely use the word, but I'll use it here, such as racism. You know, racism is a phenomenon. And what they always ended up doing, fighting each other. One wants the other group to accept their point of view. Another group wanted them to accept their point of view. And the tussle continued on and on and on. I believe that there is a better way. And perhaps the insights of Sidney Banks gives us some clues into this. I am eager to continue this conversation. If you think that this is worthwhile, send me a note. Perhaps you can have a seminar, include some other people from around the world who engage in this conversation. One person I know started a counseling firm he called One Thought. Another person I know started a counseling firm she calls One Solution. And there is a global community called Three Principles. Hey, there are people here who could help us engage controversial subjects. And this is why the Possibility Action Network exists. We subscribe to the values that include I am. We believe that we are more than the form that we see when we look in the mirror. We subscribe to the value that I can. Yes, that we believe that we have capacity, that because of what we are, because of who we are individuals, all of us are, no matter where you are on the planet, we are individuals who have capacity. And we subscribe to the value that I will. That is, that we're willing to take decisive action that's rooted in an insight, which means that we are all in this together. I am Stephen Middleton with the Possibility Action Network. I am Possibility Man. Until next time, good day